person. Launch or countdown? We know this is happening on December the 1st. We are raising some of the questions that are there as well. And we're getting on the treatment of the Hustler Fund. Interest now has been pegged on it. And also debt collectors will be on your door if you fail to pay back this particular money. And these are some of the stringent measures that actually we're trying to tease out with our panelists here. Okongo Morgan, let's just begin with you. Had we finalized with you, David Ocheng, before we go to Okongo Morgan? We had, before we took a short break. Unless you had any...
No, what I was saying is this, you know, I personally believe that this money should follow a particular path. For example, I want it to be, but it's disbursed at the constituency level. I hope that is in the regulations. I want this to be disbursed at the constituency level because the president said so. So that you don't have people having to travel far and wide. You know, this, if it is 200 million shillings per constituency, it is put at the constituency level, people apply at that level. Number two, I said earlier, let's know what are the allowable projects that can be done with this. You don't just throw money. But above all, before this money is released to anybody, because it becomes political money if you just dole it out to everybody and anybody. We must be clear on where this money is going to be used. Are you funding, for example, are we saying county government gives you a road project to do? Are you able to go to the Hustler Fund and get the money to do the job, the road, and then return the money? Where is the money going? Mm-hmm. If you don't identify that early, then we will basically just be throwing good money after bad money. So it should not, the focus should not be in meeting a campaign manifesto. No. The focus must be in meeting a felt need. That's where I would leave it at.
Okay. Yeah. Okongo Mogeni, we wind up on it to go to other issues as well.
No hustler is going to go for this money when you're already holding a gun over their heads. You're telling them, we'll give you this money. If you don't pay, we'll send you debt collectors. They will not go for it. You know, let's bite the bullet and tell Kenyans we lied to them. This idea of us giving money to hustlers, the way they understood it was all a lie. We are done with the politics. Now pass the obligation to Parliament to look at a different thing. The hustler fund that will be looked by Parliament is not the hustler funds that the Mwananchi was promised during elections. These are two different things. This one, I have to tell my people the reality. You are being given a loan. I don't know what procedure will be followed. But if you are being told to sign forms to get that money, be careful. Maybe you lose your kettle. Maybe you lose your vehicle, if that will be the security. I don't know the procedure which will be followed.
No, we can't allow we can't allow the authority to start rumor-mongering about goats and cows and cattle.
No. I'm not rumor-mongering.
No. This is the reality of the ground.
That's the reality.
You don't know how the debt collectors
there is no requirement for collateral. There's no requirement for security on that issue. There's none.
The hustlers are my friends.
There's no requirement for collateral or security on this loan, on this hustler fund.
So what are the debt collectors predicated on? If
let's be honest.
Is there, of course, there's a payback period.
Well, let's be honest to our people. Dibal, can I finish? Then I allow my friend with humility.
No worry.
Thank you, sir.
Exactly.
Yeah, let's be very honest and candid to Kenyans. The governor of Central Bank is an economist. Sankoma is a trained professor in economics. He's not going to give you money for free. And I want Kenyans in Nyamira to listen to me. When this money comes to you, it's a loan. Inamaanisha unakopesha pesa ulipe na kuna riba. The interest is 10%. That is not.
We've not established if it's 10%.
That's what is on paper for now, as of today.
No,
as I've said.
What's the interest then?
As I've said,
it's not on paper.
Dibal, if it will be reduced, if this money comes,
you've not given
how do you? Sorry,
let him finish. Let him finish.
So Dibal, if this money comes to Parliament, and unfortunately it's through regulations. You know, the procedures in Parliament is. If the regulations come as published, if you disagree, you nullify. So we go back to zero. Yes. We don't have a leeway like other bills where we can amend. We can't tweak around with the regulations. We either agree or we reject. So if they come the way they have been published, and we are not in agreement,
that's it.
We will reject and we send them back to the people. I've served in that committee of delegated legislation. And if we apply the same standards...
To the people, meaning going back to...
It goes back to CBK.
Okay.
I mean, to Treasury, to republish. Because the standards we have put in the Senate, I hope they will come to the Senate.
And then
first.
It goes back to Treasury, then it goes back to people also, to public participation.
Yeah, because what we have been saying...
It will be a long, protracted
The standard
exercise.
we have put in the Senate, and we normally have a very bipartisan approach on these things at the Senate level. We tell you, if this fund is going to affect people residing in counties, they are going to benefit, at least go and do meetings in not less than 24 counties. Do county hall meetings, explain in a very candid manner. There is nothing to hide, no cards under the table. Explain to the people that we are giving you this money, and you cannot hide. You can't tell us that you have published the regulations, but the interest is hidden. Because that's what we want the Wananchi to know, that we are giving you this money, there will be an interest of 10%. You tell them that if you have to repay, tell them if you don't repay, this will be the consequence, so that Wananchi fully understands and is able to digest this fund and understand what are the consequences if he fails to pay. After that, then you can come back to us and we have a discussion. We pass or reject. So to tell us that this money can be money given for free from government, will be lying to our people. What we can do as members of parliament is to try and cushion Wananchi, reduce that interest. We have to tell the government of the day the reality that the people you want to assist, the boda guy, the mamamboga, there is no turnaround business that can give them an ability to repay that loan at 10%. If you put it at 3%, I'll actually do public participation in Nyamira and persuade my people to take the money. But if you are giving to them at 10%, I'll tell them to be extremely cautious. There is no difference between that money and the money you are getting from cooperative bank. The rate there is 13%. This one is at 10%.
Thank you.
So I think there is a reality wake-up call from the government of the day that there is no way you can get an equivalent of what Azimio was going to give. You know, Azimio was a social support program where you're giving vulnerable families a stipend of 6,000 shillings without expecting them to pay back. So there's a difference between what Azimio was selling to Wananchi and this Hustler Fund.
But how do we know Azimio, if it came to power as well, it will have changed tune along the way?
But this money,
because it was not really cast in stone.
This was just something. I want to tell Kenyans this, on this matter.
Could we first establish
on the issue of Hustler Fund? And tell Kenyans.
Sequentially, I think let me allow Hillary. Just hold on, David. Then we'll come to you. Yes.
I equally wanted to speak to the issue of the interest rates. And I remember we have affirmed this in our previous conversations, that there is already regulations which have been published. There is the regulation, there's establishment of a board. It's called an advisory board that will now determine the rate of interest, if any. And I underline that one, if any, on this fund.
But Hillary,
what we are trying to say,
a simple question is, today you guys, you're embarking now on, first of all, public participation. Because I can see tomorrow we in Meru, Embu, Tharaka Nithi, Isiolo, Marsabit. I think the question people will want to know, first of all, is not to hear that there is an advisory board on interest rate. It's like, yes, we know this is the interest rate, and this is what you're telling Wananchi when you go for this public participation. If you are asked this question that we are asking you on the public participation forums, what would you answer?
My answer will be very simple.
Which is what?
Number one, I would want to give you a fund that will support the chairmas, that will support the groups.
They ask you straight away a very pointed question on what percent?
That will avail funds to you.
On what percent?
At the rate not more than 10%, because we cannot borrow as a government at 10% and give out beyond. It cannot be the bank.
So it could be 9.5%.
Yes, it could be 0, it could be 1, it could be 3. And what we are trying to say is that we do not want to just make it a conversation for the sake of it all. We are not politicking anymore. We want to actualize the promises which were made to the people. And the only way we can do it...
If I walk to a bank today, of course, and I want to borrow this money, I'll want to know how much interest rate I'll be paying.
And that is exactly what the board will do, the BAL. We are setting up a structure so that it doesn't become another Uwezo fund. it doesn't become another youth fund. That is not accessible to the people who are meant to benefit.
Why the public participation now? Why
So
can't you wait for the board? You decide, then once you put your things, your ducks in a row, then we know this is time to roll out.
We are setting up this fund so that it becomes sustainable. If I release it 6,000 per month without anything beyond the release of the money, that will deplete the source. Although this is funds which would be appropriated by Parliament, we also must take responsibility as a government at the end of the day to say, we have released this money, what will happen in the next financial year? If we set it up as a pool that is a fund, I pay you, I give you, you pay back without interest, so that the next phase can also be sustainable. That is the whole essence of this public participation.
But we've seen this revolving sort of fund failing also with HELB and other funds in this country, that it cannot be, you pay back, then that particular money is used to pay another person. And what if, yes, they're bad debt, as we know, they're debt collectors who will be there, what will be happening to the fund?
No, the clarity on it is that we will not be expected now to send it out to the person and 2-3 months down the line you're sending you collectors or debt collectors, like what Commissioner said. It is not. When you were, if you were to read the regulations, the essence is to set up the structure so that it becomes something we can speak about in a very structured manner.
Okay.
We can't have a conversation about the youth fund now, for instance, or the Wezo fund, other than I have been given, it's not been repaid, it is not expected to be repaid, and another group after the end of a government of the day goes out, that fund is forgotten.
All right, thank you. Yusuf.
Well, I am surprised because the senator is defending something he has absolutely no clue. He has clearly told us he does not know how much interest rate would be charged on this loan.
I think
that is where he should have that's where he should have stopped, because this was a political campaign pledge, and political campaign pledges are made, like Mheshimiwa David Ochieng has said, by everybody who's running for office, even for us when we're campaigning. But now we have gone beyond the election. We're now in a normal environment where the government of the day is supposed to sit down soberly, sit down and say, look, these are the promises you've made. How many of these pledges can you realistically carry out the way you had expressed in your manifesto? And to a certain extent, any decision that is going to be made by the government must be within rationality. It must have, the government must have the money and the capability to do it. I don't have a problem in setting a regulation. Mm-hmm. But the reality is that the government cannot give this particular fund at a zero rate, zero interest. It is not money that it will be giving out free. It certainly has to charge for the cost of that loan. Yes. And that cost is likely to be within the market rate. The market rate now is 10% and above. There's nothing below 10%. You cannot go to any bank unless you're a very special customer and get a loan that is less than 10%. And that's why we're saying that this fund, although well-intended and promised during the election, is not so easy to implement. It's not so easy. And there's nothing wrong for the government to say, look guys, we promised this, but the reality does not allow, and this is what we're going to do. Be honest with the Kenyan public. But now to just, throw out arguments to say it's not going to be 10%, it's not going to be too expensive. The reality is that this fund is going to be beyond the reach of the ordinary person. They simply would not have the capability to benefit from it in the big numbers that we thought the pledge had. It will benefit some people, but not everyone. And that is a reality that we should accept and move on. I mean, it's not a big deal. And I agree with the others that we're not expecting the government to meet all its pledges. Mm. It has just come into office. But what they're not saying is some of those pledges are not possible. You cannot do them. We don't have the funds for them. Our economy is not capable of delivering on some of those propaganda political promises that the political parties and particularly the ruling party made. And there's nothing wrong in that. come up and say, look, guys, we're going to redo things. We're going to be realistic. And this is what we can do. But the more you argue on the fact that you're going to carry on your unrealistic manifesto, the more you become ridiculous in the eyes of the public, and the more you would sound a liar, a con person who has cheated the people of Kenya. And the people of Kenya are not fools. They're intelligent people. They can see when they have been cheated. They can see when they have been lied to. And I think that is the way we need to move on from now on. The government should be realistic, do what it can do within their budget and our capabilities, and tell the Kenyan people what is right.
Well, no one has lied to anybody. If he's honest, I think the president has been very honest on this. He's himself come out and said that no one's going to receive free money. Hasn't he? He has said so more than once, that this is not going to be free money. I mean, I'm happy that the four of us are legislators and that this regulation is going to come to us. We serve people just like the president serves people. I want us to, if I hear us right, this fund is necessary. So it's upon us to make sure that when the fund becomes available, it's not something that the president is going to tick that, oh, this is what they did in 2013, 2014. President Uhuru and Deputy President Ruto, they were taking that, oh, we launched Wezo Fund, oh, we launched Youth Fund. This can't be the case this time round. The Hustler Fund must be launched and be used. We must see results. And by the way, in Kenya Kwanza PGs, we've agreed with the president that we not acquire. We are not his singers. We've agreed that we're going to, where he is right, we'll support him. Where he is wrong, we'll tell him this is wrong. We agreed on that. And so let's start from that. And in my opinion, when these regulations come to Parliament, and I'll be there, by the way, we're going to put grace period for payment for 12 months. We must put a grace period that you receive the money today, the money starts becoming due 12 months later. Once you agree on that one, you know what the president is going to be doing. 12 months is enough for anybody doing any business to know whether he's able to make money or not. So the first thing, the grace period for payment.
So the grace period is what? 12 months, then you start paying?
Yes.
So 1 year?
Yes, you give it 1 year to recognize yourself and receive the money.
Interest free?
Nah, I'm building a case. I'm building a case for you, Dubai. Because this thing is coming to Parliament. And even that's why we sit as parliamentarians. We are the politicians. These people in the offices doing these regulations don't know how these systems work, in my opinion. If they want to build another bank, let them put the money in the bank. But if you want to do a social fund, it has to be a social fund. And so put a grace period, put a minimum interest rate of 3%. I mean, it's not unrealistic. We belong to SACCOs. So Yusuf and I belong to a SACCO called Pacoso. We pay 1%. SACCOs pay 3%, 5% interest rates. It's not something that is not possible. It's doable. SACCOs, people pay small amounts of money in interest. And so having interest rates below 5% is possible. So I, in my opinion, I'm happy with this discussion. That what is this bringing out is that hustlers will not accept anything 5, 8%. We'll want something below 5%. And the people concerned are going to be advised that way. Number two, remove any allusion, remove any reference that someone can go to jail because of this fund. No. Let Kenyans come take this money, have your 12 months. If you're not able to pay,
free money.
We can have a discussion. Yes, this is government money. It's not everybody. We want to take this money, have your 12 months to do the business you want to do with it. If you can't pay, let's sit down and have a discussion. That's why you have a board. Have structures that will enable us look at how because how do chamas work? How are you going to have guarantors in this fund? Because if you bought a piki with the 100,000 shillings you picked, we will be able to know that the Dibal bought a piki, but in that period, COVID came, there were not so many customers. So this only much money you made. It has to be done realistically. We can't use commercial bank rates and commercial bank regulations to run this fund. If that's the reason, then I can tell the president he's going to fail on this one. We have to make it a social fund. And I think that discussion should be that way. We should not be defending what is not going to work. We should just make the fund work. It's that simple.
All right.
Yeah, normally, you know, the devil is in the detail. Because I've had my colleague, my friend David Ocheng, saying that we borrow from Pacoso at 1%. You know, banks are normally honest. They will tell you, we are giving you this loan at 13% per annum. Pacoso tells you, we give you the loan at 1% per month. When you convert to...
Of course, it's 13% or 12%.
It's 12%. So it's not cheap money. So me, I'll be very candid with my people in Namibia.
I was about to ask if, because of it's open to the public as well.
It's 12% per annum.
Yeah.
You know, that's how you calculate interest. You look at the interest per annum. So even if this fund comes to an end and you're told it's 1% per month, the reality it's still the same thing like a commercial loan, which is at 13% per annum. And it's expensive, that's expensive loan. And number two, I know that where we are now, the government wants this to be a loan for business, where you borrow, you do business, you repay, so that somebody benefits the following year. And three, if you don't repay, with tremendous respect to my learned colleague Gochien, if you don't repay, there will be consequences. Maybe you'll be listed, you may not be able to borrow, maybe you'll be barred from accessing that money the following year. So it's not free money. So what we are telling Kenyans is that what the government is giving you is no different than what you will walk to cooperative bank.
That's not true. That's not true. Let's not fearmonger on this issue. On this issue of Hustler Fund, we will not fearmonger. We will sit in Parliament, we make the regulations and make it accessible to the hustlers.
Let me come to, because we've had the Wezo Fund, we've had the Women Trust Fund as well, Youth Fund, and how they've been managed before and misused before. How do we know that people may want to access this particular fund and they still have some shadow companies? We can pick a case in point with the Wezo Fund, or even with the Women Fund as well, or with AGPO, right? With the procurement, people have companies they've listed. They're the faces of the youth and the women, but if you go behind, it is so and so who is accessing this money, who has the wherewithal. He's not a youth, he's not a woman, but he has shadow faces now, as proxies. What are the mechanisms to try and tame this? Yeah. This is another question. That's then important. Also my director is actually reminding me a very critical question on how discriminatory this fund is. How Sharia compliant is it if it's interest? We know we have our brothers from the Muslim community who also, they believe anything that you are, putting interest on, that is haram at the end of the day. So when you talk about Muslim compliant, are we talking to people who are firm believers in their religious persuasion and will not be accessing this fund because there is an interest element according to their religion that is not really or doesn't sit well with them? So how then do we address that?
Thank you very much, Dibal. One of the things which I'll keep on insisting is that this is a developing structure of fund. You've asked the question as to how do we ensure that the beneficiaries of this fund are indeed the actual people. When you look at this, I have read the regulations. The board is expected to give a breakdown of the eligibility criteria to benefit. For example, if you're a chama ordinarily is registered. It has membership, a list of members who are to be the members to benefit. If you are a group like a SACCO, it similarly has got an independent regulatory framework. If it is an individual, me and you, we appear there as natural persons who are in business, and we have a certain business that we are doing, and we put in that application so that we benefit from the fund. How then the board will analyze the qualifications to benefit the fund is part of what it will establish the cause of its public participation, because people will input into what they would wish to have as a regulatory framework to benefit from the fund. In the process then, we will know we are looking at border groups, we are looking at SACCOs, and as Mheshimiwa Hucheng said, the moment these regulations come into discussion in Parliament, there are certain things that definitely will do. I am alive to the fact that if it is not going to be acceptable to the legislature, then it will go back as it were. But in terms of ensuring that it is operationalized, we will put in those details that the board will definitely consider, because it's almost part of public participation. Whether it will be discriminatory or not is a factor definitely to be considered. If I don't qualify on the basis of the regulation or on the basis of the criteria that has been put by the board, I do not qualify. We can never have a 100% inclusive entity or operationalization of an institution. But I am alive to the fact that, for example, our Muslim brothers and sisters would feel if I am not supposed to be paying any interest and this thing has an interest, it will be to that extent discriminatory to them. However, I am very hopeful that the moment this thing is placed or is put into public participation, all those issues will be considered so that all hustlers who would qualify under whatever framework that has been put in place will get to benefit from this fund. And of course, as we've said, this being a public fund or resource, somebody else needs to benefit beyond, and hence the basis of a repayment.
Thank you.
With or without interest.
All right, thank you. Yusuf, you want to comment on that briefly, then we wind up on...
well, surely, yes. I haven't looked at that particular element of the fund because I hadn't seen the fund coming into existing. I thought mostly now it was in a discussion, but definitely for it to reach everybody, particularly the large number of Muslims in this country, it has to have a different way of paying, or in this particular case, maybe it has to be a Sharia compliance. Mm-hmm. And I'm sure that would come out in the public engagement and public participation.
But before you leave, the issue you raised that is very important, not just for the Hustler Fund, but generally for all the things we do as a country, policy frameworks, the things we do to make our lives better, is that this country seems to have two different kinds of laws. Those for the poor and those for the rich. And that the rich can have their way all the time, and the poor, it's like a lottery. So the question you ask about access and abuse is very important. And I would imagine that if anybody is penalized on this fund, it should be the borrower. It should be the person who lies that he's youth or that he's a woman. It should be, these are the people that we should go for. If I was asked to do this law personally, and I know we have experiences, not just from ways of fund. If you look at, for example, the way Black Empowerment Program in South Africa was implemented, we ended up with probably 10% or 5% very rich blacks, and the major masses of blacks didn't grow with the Black Empowerment Program in South Africa, simply because of implementation frameworks that are weak, like you've said. So I would imagine that as we do these regulations, part of what should be more punitive would be those who lie to qualify, not those who qualify and are given the money. And so I'm hoping that when this happens and we have the advisory board, the board is able to follow up and ensure that the beneficiaries are the ones who benefit. On Sharia compliance, I agree with everyone else that these are issues that can be sorted out on a case-by-case basis. Because, I mean, our Muslim brothers also do business, and they make profit in their businesses. So if you're funding a business, if money is being given to you to fund a business, then I'm sure the board is able to work out a framework that fits everyone's needs and requirements. But I wouldn't imagine that someone would not be able to access money because of a sectoral or a law that bars them from earning interest.
Right. Yes, you already said something.
Yes, I think Mheshimiwa David Ochieng knows that the law is usually used, is enacted and used by the elite, people like him and the other two gentlemen who are sitting here. And it always favors...
So you're not an elite in this case?
I'm not a lawyer.
He's included himself.
And they make regulations to favor them. And that is my main concern about the Hustler Fund. It shouldn't really be called the Hustler Fund anymore, because it does not meet the needs and it does not give access to capital to the ordinary person in my neighborhood, the Kikomba person, the Shaurimoyo person, people from the slums of Nairobi who are desperately in need of capital to be able to get up and and put some money into their businesses and create an alternative livelihood. What I'm worrying is that this is going to be a political elite fund, people who are associated, the people in the know, the people with the connections. And that is the danger, because those are the people who can afford to pay for the kind of interest rate that is likely to be required. And also, if you look at the requirements are very stringent. None of the people in my neighborhood who desperately need this fund would be able to meet those.
Which ones are these?
These regulations. The Mamamboga, the Kikomba.
Which requirements are stringent?
The requirements that have been spelled out in the published.
The value have to be clear. Which is this requirement that is stringent? For example, a 10 million fine. Where would anyone who is a defaulter? That isn't a requirement. That is a consequence.
Yes, it's a consequence, but that would keep any ordinary person from going to access this particular. The interest rate itself.
The actual cost of the loan.
The interest, the cost of that borrowing is beyond the means of many ordinary people, and also the regulations that are going to be made. Many of our laws favor the mighty, the rich, and the powerful, and I think it is up to us to make it.
And from that publication that you have there, it says that the fund shall ensure that its product and services are commercially viable, rapidly scalable at reasonable cost, and low operational risk without distorting the market. This is from a draft legal framework from the Treasury. But that is neither here nor there at the end of the day, because people want, these are facts. These are, you need figures. Yeah.
Dibal, free advice. Just free advice to order. If we go the way we are going, this is a road to self-destruction. You start telling Wananchi you are giving them money to find them 10 million, they will not take it. And there will be a backlash from the hustler and the likes. If you go to developed countries, if you want to assist the poor, if you want to give them social support, remove all these conditions and tell Wananchi that we want to give you money to boost the economy. During COVID, if you went to the US, the government was sending money to Wananchi. Citizens were getting money coming to their account, $1,500.
All right.
And they don't tell you must fulfill the following conditionalities and the likes. So let's tell Wananchi the truth. If we are able to give Wananchi money as we promised and say this is money to support the hustlers, give them money for free.
Thank you.
If you want to set up money for them to borrow, tell them we are availing money for you to borrow loans. Don't call it, I don't know, hustler funds and the like.
All right.
And then tell them when you borrow, there will be consequences. Tell Wananchi the truth. Tell them this is not what we promised you, free money. This one is money for people who are doing business. Several of you in the villages who are not doing business, you are not going to get any money. Then Wananchi know they can draw the line and say this money is loan for people in business, hustlers, our money is not coming. Then we move forward.
Just to also wade into that, we are so much preempting a lot about this hustler fund. And just to put it into perspective, it is in the regulations called the Financial Inclusion Fund. It's not called the Hustlers Fund anymore in the regulations. And I believe when it goes out there for participation, we will justify why it is called a Financial Inclusion Fund.
We're not hustler.
But then,
you're changing a bit. I think everyone love the moniker of hustler. That's why it is financial inclusion.
Because we wanted to also frame it in a structured manner. You see, when Commissioner here talks about during COVID, when the US was releasing funds to socially support its citizens.
So what stimulus fund?
Stimulus fund.
That's what we want.
It came in form of a structured manner. These regulations is the same thing. We cannot just wake up and release funds. To who are we releasing these funds to? The basis upon which the regulations are being put in place
I want us
to know these people. Because we must have that database.
There is a very interesting article on the front page of the Star that we want us to look, especially on the Parastatal performance and targets, that we have top 10 performing state corporations. The reason I'm asking you is, or I'm actually latching on the Star, is the fact that we will have a newly installed board that will handle this hustler fund, isn't it?
Yes.
I wanted to ask you, do we need a new board? Looking at all this, some of these parastatals that are here, and we are trying to collapse. You're talking about austerity measures. This is another, of course, cost to the exchequer to try and sustain this board. Why do we need a new board?
It's a good question.
The reason why we need a new board.
Have we
the lawyers.
Why do we need a new board?
Allow me. I'll just
Maybe
say
he's
two
drafting
sentences.
the terms of reference of the new board.
No, I'm not. I'm reading the regulations just like any other person here. But I know it will come to Parliament.
Remind them you are the chair of Justice, Legal Affairs.
The Senate.
Is the chair?
Yes.
I am the chairperson. So I wanted only to say two sentences why we need this board. We want to structure the Hustler Fund in a manner that we can talk about in a professional manner. That is number one. It can only happen if we have a board. It can only happen if we have a team of people.
The question would be, first of all, have we exhausted amongst all these parastatals that we have? Because there was the idea of coming up with a Biashara Bank.
Yes.
Yeah?
No, this Hustler Fund has not been there before. That is why we are asking the CS Treasury to give us regulations so that he will be part of the board.
But how have we been operating with Wezo Fund, with Youth Fund? How are these funds been operating? Under which legal framework have they been operating that now we have the Hustler Fund that will be, exceptionally different from these other funds? That we need a new board just for the Hustler Fund.
And that is my reference, my concern, not my concern, my statement, the bar, that forget about whatever else that has been happening before. We went out campaign
so that I can get an understanding, because you're talking about austerity measures, and now we're coming up with a new board itself when we're trying to collapse this.
We have nowhere else to place the Hustler Fund because they didn't exist before. We have got to set up a structure for it so that it's rolled out.
Well, on that issue, I want to disagree with my colleague. I mean, maybe we would want to have it when it succeeds, we claim success of it and all that, but that can be a reason. If there exists a framework through which you can do this fund, I would advise that it be done through existing frameworks.
Yes.
Yeah. So that, I mean, I don't think you have to be right all the time.
Yeah.
The issue is that if, for example, we check and find that we can actually collapse all these funds, a family action fund, Wezo Fund, Youth Fund, and have them run through the same institution. And I'm going to talk to the chairperson concerned in this matter and leadership in Parliament. That if you don't have to invent the wheel. Because guys, the people have done this before. The Youth Fund, the Wezo Fund have structures for training and capacity building, and they have some memory institutionally on how this can be done. So that if there exists an institution that can do this, for me, the better. Because two things are then done. The speed with which this fund needs to be implemented, you cannot allow a new board to come in and do all these things at the same time, no. So if there exists an institution that can do these things, I would personally advise that we do them through those existing structures that are known and that are trusted.
In fact, sorry.
That's okay.
No, continue.
Finish.
If there's none, and that the board that you're setting up has some preeminent expertise in the area, then I would advise that. But I don't see why a new board would have preeminent expertise more than what already exists. And so there'll be some wisdom in using the existing structures. Because, for example, if you look at what they're talking about, they're saying that, you must have an account in KCB, National Bank. Really? Why would you link it as to a bank? If my next bank is Family Bank, why should I go to Family Bank? If the nearest bank is Equity Bank, why should I go to Equity Bank? And that's why I'm telling you that, in my opinion, the technocrats may have come up with regulations. But when they come to Parliament, is so that we can look at them and see if they're realistic and practical. And this is a political fund. Let's not, pussyfoot about it. I'm sorry for using that word. But let's not, gerrymander around and say, it's some very weirdly new thing. It is a political fund. We as politicians will have to weigh in on it and ensure that our people can benefit from it. And I can tell you this for sure. Regulations that are outlandish, that do not take into account the hustlers' needs, will not pass through Parliament. That I can tell you. Will not.
Yeah, I wanted to say that, there is this thing we normally call perpetual succession in government. And if you look, you're asking about the structures of the funds that have been there before. Uwezo Fund, Youth Fund, you know, they have a full board, they have CEOs, and there's even a data bank. You know, if you want to look at people who have benefited from Uwezo Fund, Youth Fund, and they never repaid the money, you get this data from the Uwezo Fund. So instead, just to agree with the Honorable Chair, instead of us coming up with another board again, calling it, I don't know, you call it financial what?
It's called Financial Inclusion
Yeah,
Fund.
Financial Inclusion Fund.
And the board now will be a Financial Inclusion Board Fund.
Duplication. I think the best approach would be that let's look at this fund. This is taxpayers' money. It's not really political fund, Honorable Chair. This is taxpayers' money that we want to benefit mwananchi out there, whether they are Azimio supporters or UDA supporters. They all have a right to benefit from these taxpayers' money. So let's collapse this into one. We set up one fund that can roll out this money to business people, because the way I'm seeing this story, the way it's developing, this is money to help people in business. It's not money to help the so-called hustler who is suffering out there. It's money that's supposed to boost businesses for low-card business people across the country. Then
but correction, Dibal, this is how it was sold. The Hustler Fund was sold as money for business. It wasn't sold as money that we throw to anybody. I think on that issue, the Senator is not getting it right. It was sold from the word go, that this money will be given to them for business. That's what it was sold.
I think now we are struggling to unbank now the hustler itself, because that's why you're changing the name hustler to financial inclusion, because now who is a hustler? And, you know, for the last 5 years we've been trying to define who is a hustler. And I think now chicken are coming home to roost as far as the name hustler is concerned, and now you're changing the moniker itself. No, it is the business people. Because hustler was all encompassing.
Yes. So we must.
So if we say your business, who is a business person? Do you have any threshold on what we can call a business?
And I can tell you, let me tell you, the next shock for the hustler will be when you start applying now. The stringent conditions that you must meet for you to be able to access this money. Most of these people you call hustlers, their bank is M-Pesa. Now if you tell them you need to have an account in KCB, you need to have an account in National Bank, they will not qualify. They will not benefit. So as I said at the beginning, we have reached a level where there is now disconnect between the government of the day and that person you are calling hustler down. There is a big disconnect between these two. So we need to go back to the drawing board. Those of us who want to support the hustler, go back to the drawing board, rethink this matter, and maybe separate between having a social support program for the many Kenyans who are suffering out there, who can benefit from some government support in terms of money released to them without conditionalities of paying back or the fear of you will be fined 10 million or a debtor. Then have a different fund that's supposed to support businesses, small businesses in the country. Let's debunk this idea of hustler. Now politics is gone. You cross the line, number one, you're in government. Now let's assist you govern the country in a proper manner. Accept that we need to help the poor people, the vulnerable Kenyans down there. We come up with a structure. We have a bipartisan approach in Parliament. So it becomes an idea for all of us, not just an idea for us a nation. That way, we'll be able to have an impact on the mwananchi. But as we speak today, Honorable Sigei, Honorable Chieng, the mwananchi down there is yet to feel the UDA government.
Okay.
Yes.
Well, we need to be winding up. Yusuf, you wanted to say something? I just wanted to run through that list, but because if you're going to have another board, yes, the parastatals.
Yeah, no, I am puzzled by this because it includes public universities.
Yes.
Which are really not parastatals as such.
It's a state
but I also see some factories like the Trans Nzoia and Kimilili sugar factories. And I think there would come a time
do we need also maybe to draw a demarcation line between a parastatal and a state corporation? Maybe the universities and the state corporations.
They're not even, I would say, they're semi-autonomous. I think the universities are not similar to some of the parastatals in which a government ministry would have an oversight. They have their own independent boards. They have their own ways of doing things, and they shouldn't be really considered parastatals. And I'm interested in public universities because...
But they draw from the exchequer at the end of the day.
Yes, of course. They get about 91 billion shillings from the national budget. Because they are government universities. They're not private. So I think the private universities, the public universities have a problem. They are suffering. They're in a terminal crisis. And to a certain extent, they're underfunded, and they're also underperforming in terms of expectations. And I think there's a need for us to look at our public universities separate from the parastatals, because some of these parastatals can be privatized. Like there's no really any reason why the government should be running sugar or textile factories. This should be run on the principles of on business models.
All right.
But a public university is an institution. Many of the institutions that are here would probably not make money.
All right.
Yeah, and they need investment so that we can meet our targets as a developing country in terms of science and research. Produce the best. I saw the cabinet secretary lamenting the other day on Twitter about another tweeter from a Kenyan who had gone to the University of Aberdeen and seen how the University of Aberdeen was outperforming in terms of research. And he was saying, when our university is going to be? Forgetting that the University of Aberdeen is one of the oldest and probably the best endowed universities in the world, is that we really need to invest in our universities, and we need to get a comprehensive and a radical rescue plan that can change how they operate.
Thank you. Right, because we really stopped for time. I wanted just to run through that particular list, especially the poor performance.
Because that list is a misnomer.
Sorry?
That list is a misnomer. I mean, it's an list, if you ask me.
Why not?
How would you, for example, classify a regulatory body as stop performing or poor performing? On what basis?
This is according to, of course, the report that has come out. If you read...
but if you look at this list, you are saying poor performers are, for example, Kenya Academic of Sports and Doping Agency. So what does it do business? On what basis are you classifying it? So I think we need to have had classes of state corporations. Okay? One, the universities, they are not meant to make money. Unless you have UNES in Nairobi University, which is a business enterprise owned by the university. But if you start putting universities on the same line as you put National Irrigation Authority, National Irrigation Authority gets all its money, every other cent that it has. It's exchequer. So how do you classify it with the university that depends on fees and all that? And so, first of all, I think this list for me is a misnomer. Number two, is what the Honorable Yusuf has said. Sometimes we are doing, even this classification is being done, for example, in the wrong premise. Because we need to know, let's, for example, take textile, Rivertex. Rivertex is now owned by Moi University, but government has pumped money into it. Why? Because we want to revive the textile industry in the country. And so government has interest in that. Now, there are other parcels like Mombasa Sugar that used to be owned by government but now has fallen below. There has no money not so much government money going into it. And so we must be clear on, if you're saying, for example, that MB University is excellent, on what? Is it academics? Is it financial? Is it sports? What is it excellent about? Because you cannot tell me that you're going to classify MB University on the same plane with Kenya National Estates and you get a good comparison. No, you can't. And so I just wanted to say that...
meeting their targets, I think maybe that was the threshold. Because you have your targets, you have a strategic plan.
Yeah, if you go that way, you end up with what the minister said.
Your targets.
You end up with what the minister said. The minister thinks, for example, and he's my friend, with so much respect, he thinks that university should be doing business. Their core business is education. And let me tell you, in this country, if you ever put universities on an issue that they must be making profits, so many people will not go anywhere. The Sigay and Iron, probably Honorable Kongo here,
Thank you.
We were paying
Why do you
elfu kumi na sita school fees per year. If the government puts in 145,000 per year, if you remove that capitation, where will our children go? Where will people go?
The poor.
You know, so
Thank you.
and this is something that I think is a systemic issue with the new ministers. They just keep talking.
Right, thank you. An agency like Anti-Doping Agency, I think my colleague Moses Wakisi did a very, telling, of course, feature on the doping in this country.
Weekend, yes.
So then how do we also zero in on Anti-Doping Agency of Kenya in light of what has been happening so far? Because they have been listed even the last year, yet we draw from the exchequer. That is primarily their
But do they have the necessary inputs? Do they have the resources? Do they have the expertise? What kind of terms of reference do they operate on?
Why then should we come up with this agency if we don't have the resources, the expertise? Then why do we draw money from
many
the exchequer
agencies have
and we
been
come with these
created.
agencies in the first place? I think it goes through the legislation in Parliament. You're the people who endorse this to come up with the agencies. These are the questions you should be asking you.
No, sure. I think we would look into the anti-doping agency. But the question is, some of these agencies are not well-funded, well-resourced, and you cannot expect them to perform optimally.
Thank you.
Given the large number of doping cases that are coming up.
Thank you. We need
I wanted to comment on the list.
Yeah. Could we maybe comment as we can actually carry over to the next discussion next week? Yes. But you just get your headline thoughts, Hillary. You can actually even coach it in your headline thoughts as well. Briefly, 30 seconds.
I want to wish success to all the candidates who are going to sit for the national examinations. And also urge our colleagues as we pick our representatives to Yala on Thursday. I hope we'll pick the best who can represent us in this regional parliament. It's a very important body, and we really need to send the best that we have to Yala.
Thank you. What I wanted to say was to comment on how we actually ranking these institutions. It is indeed not the very best, because the key parameters is about the mandate, their ability to repay their pending bills, in terms of customer experience, completion of projects. You can't rank University of Nairobi and Nzoia Sugar. It's completely abnormal to do it. So I would want to leave it at that as regards this list. It is not the very best. However, you've asked about the decisions that Parliament would ordinarily do. They would pass or approve establishment of such institutions on the basis of the assignment that is expected to do. The challenge would always be, once it's already set up, does it really get availed the resources to run its affairs? Lastly, let me also wish the candidates the very best as they sit for the exams, and ask the vetting committee in Parliament also to fast-track the process of vetting of the nominees to the position of the principal secretaries.
Thank you.
And lastly, as we go into the PG for the Yala nominations, I wish all the candidates all the best as well.
Yusuf, that a second.
I also want to add my voice to congratulate all the candidates who are sitting for exams and to wish them well and success, particularly given the fact that we have gone through a very rough period in the last 1 year or so, and all the best.
Thank you.
And then,
thank you. I need to stop there.
I want to congratulate, first of all, the Honorable Mogeni for being commissioner of PAC. I hope you know that.
Yeah.
And it was a hard fought position. Thanks for fighting so hard for it.
And Sige as well, the chair.
I also wish our candidates the best in the exams. And finally, Debal, tell the country, let's just reduce corruption by 50%. We'll be fine. All these things, these collaterals and I think you're talking about, reduce corruption by 50%. The country will grow.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Gentlemen, I really do appreciate. We need to wind up on that. I know we had to cover a lot, but we are preached for time. But I really do appreciate your input this morning, especially on the ASLA fine. Still, a lot of questions are being asked and papered around, so that needs to be clarified. And we hope, even as we go, to get public participation on this as well, things will be made crystal. Thank you very much for your valued company. We'll cross over now to Mombasa Road, where my colleague Jeff Magiro is standing by to take us through, of course, the sports of the day. The time is ticking on the clock there. We're heading towards, of course,